This is possibly one of the nicest doctor's offices. This is not the classic sort of NHS doctor surgery that I'm used to.
I mean, you're like a mackerel. You're flipping around in that bed like you're on a rotisserie. Yeah, we're not talking about hippies from the 60s. A free radical is an oxygen molecule that's become flammable.
Is it too late for someone of my age, 54,
Definitely.
to start it? No, but seriously, is it too late? Is it too late?
We have an English phrase called yeah?
I think of the immune system as our best friend, but our worst enemy, because it has the power to heal, but it also has the power to kill.
I'm here again with Mark Liponis in one of the most beautiful parts of the world called the Berkshires in Lennox at Stoneover Health, which is Mark's practice that he created after he was medical director for 27 years, 25 years? 25 years, Cordoba said 25 years, silver wedding anniversary at Canyon Ranch. Last time we introduced you to Mark, we spoke about his, I guess, is hopeful skepticism a useful way of describing your approach?
Sure, I like it.
You're hopeful, but you're certainly skeptical about both sides of the allopathic and non-allopathic alternative areas. And today, I think we're going to talk about your work on the immune system.
Yeah, I want to interrupt though, because the last time we were talking, you mentioned how we had met, and you talked about the chief chef at Canyon Ranch, Scott Uline. And I didn't do him proper amount of service because
we can do that today.
You didn't realize, he was far beyond just a cook. He was creating these recipes that were served in the dining room to these high rollers, and they had better be good.
Yeah.
And, you didn't get a lot, so you had to make something that was small and really good. But what people didn't realize is not only did he have to invent these recipes, he had to do it with handcuffs behind his back, because the nutritionist would give him a list of what he could and couldn't use. And if this one had too much fat or too much salt or too much sugar, forget it. And so he had to live within a very tight, constraint of producing these dishes that would become healthful. But again, he couldn't use the ingredients, perhaps, not so much butter, not so much sugar, not so much salt.
Not the easy go-tos that chefs use.
Exactly, because you can make something taste great if you put sugar, sweet, and butter and salt in there. But he wasn't allowed to. So to make something taste that good, that was so healthful, I think was really an incredible.
And I think he did some books with you, didn't he? He did one or two.
We did some cooking books, which are fantastic. Those recipes are still amazing recipes. And
he worked for me at Lyon for a while, and he created the Sicilian meatballs and also the very popular black bean dish, which actually is a staple of Lyon today, even though we've sold it. So well done, Scott, as you say.
No, he's brilliant. And, his talents as a chef go beyond most, because everyone else can make it taste good by using his ingredients that he didn't, So it was really fascinating, really healthy stuff.
As I said last time we met, he has so much respect for you, and he's the reason that we knew each other in the first place, or know each other in the first place. So, Mark, one of the books that you wrote was really a sort of early 2000s about ultra prevention, and I'd like to do at some point a deep dive on that book and that thesis, that way of thinking. But one of the most fascinating things you've also written about is the impact of the immune system on health, and in particular on aging. And so that's what we've come to talk to you about today, and to do a deep dive on that. I think it's going to be really fascinating, but also really practical and useful for people, because this is a book that has so much you can do to fix it. But let's start with the summary of the thinking. How did you get to this thinking?
I think the first line in the book, which I still think is, a shocking statement. And, I put it out there to a degree to shock people into thinking about things differently. And the line is that aging is an autoimmune disease. An autoimmune disease. Aging. And nobody has really, I don't think, said that before. But the immune system is involved with the aging process. And, people think of the immune system as, when they get a sore throat and they have strep and their immune system's going to attack that infection and heal it. But it's so much more robust than that. And, I think of the immune system as sort of our best friend, but our worst enemy, because it has the power to heal, but it also has the power to kill. And, well, what is the immune system, first of all? It's mostly these white blood cells, of which there's many varieties, but the white blood cells are sort of the workhorses of the immune system. For example, they can gobble up bacteria and gobble up viruses. They can attack infections, abscesses. They can, really help us get over infectious diseases. And that's the main strength of the immune system. And to do that, I always joke around about the immune system having the WMD, the weapons of mass destruction, because it does. What the immune system uses for these weapons is to kill these serious germs that would otherwise be able to kill us. Like, for example, let's say before vaccines were around and somebody got tetanus, you only had your immune system to protect you from that. And if it was strong enough to protect you from tetanus, you might live. If not, you might not. And so to protect us from tetanus, the immune system uses these weapons of mass destruction. Some of them might be just gobbling up viruses and bacteria, but they have chemicals. They have these things called antibodies that can direct the chemicals that attack these germs. They make cytokines that are like the communication system of the immune system. So the white blood cells can talk to each other. And they can say, hey, we got a problem over in the elbow. Let's go over there. And then the white blood cells will go over to the elbow and maybe take care of some infection that might be there. And so it's very important. They have complement, which is this, if your immune system has to use complement, man, you're sick. You could be like in the hospital because, you're so sick. And so many things, the immune system can be overpowered and use its weapons in an uncontrolled way.
What
and that
an amazing
can be
analogy,
dangerous.
Mark. Such a powerful and useful analogy for people to understand how it works.
It's so powerful. And, it's frightening, really, because if the immune system gets triggered to release all its weapons, oh, man, we're going to be feeling a world of pain.
Because anything which is an intervention has unintended consequences and side effects, right?
Absolutely.
So if you've got cockroaches and you want Rentokil or the pest people to come in, they might get rid of the cockroaches, but what are they going to poison in the house?
Sure, there's be like I'd say collateral damage, where you're trying to address this infection, but there's going to be some, fallout around the area that's also going to be dangerous. And when the immune system uses these weapons, it leaves some scars behind. It's a battlefield, and there's some damage that happens. Like if you think about a very common condition, fatty liver. We hear about this all the time, where fat is like clogging up the liver. It mostly happens in diabetes, but also in just obesity. And it's an inflammatory disorder of the liver. It causes a kind of a hepatitis. They call it steatohepatitis. So it's itis means inflammation. It's inflammation of the liver. And that's from the immune system that's in the liver that's, becoming activated. The problem is that causes some collateral damage and the liver becomes scarred. It can lead to cirrhosis. It's one of the most common causes of cirrhosis because of the scarring that happens, the collateral damage from the immune system using these weapons in the liver. And you could describe these weapons and the defenses of the immune system as the term inflammation. Inflammation. Because anytime the immune system is triggered, that's what we call inflammation. And it could be something that we need to save our lives. Like if you have pneumonia, it's going to attack that infection in the lung, and it's going to help you to heal and get better. But sometimes the inflammation might not be from an infection. Let's say you've got arthritis, your shoulder's hurting you, and you wore out the cartilage, and the white blood cells are in there trying to do something, but they're just causing a problem because it's more inflammation. And so that attack can sometimes be misdirected.
So if we were to summarize the range of reasons that the immune system deploys these weapons. One is infection. The other one is an example of wear and tear, where it needs to be supported because of what's happening physically, bone on bone, in the example of arthritis. Fatty liver and obesity is not necessarily viral, but it's not viral. It's a condition which also drives inflammation. Are there any other types of reasons that the immune system is activated?
If we back up for a minute, so we can just understand that a little bit better. If you think back to like 1920. 1920, the life expectancy in the U.S. was around 60. Now it's like 80. And the reason that the life expectancy was so short back in 1920 is we didn't have antibiotics. We didn't have vaccines. We had kids dying from pneumonia, kids dying from polio. We had kids dying from preventable and treatable diseases. We didn't even really understand hygiene then. And so because we didn't have these other ways to help your body to overcome infections, your immune system had to do everything. It didn't have any antibiotics and hygiene and surgical procedures to rely on. And so it was all about the immune system. So the main function of the immune system and how it evolved was to protect us from infectious diseases. And that's its primary, goal. It wants to keep us from dying from infection.
Typically in nature, the majority of its work was against bacteria, viruses, other infections, which...
people didn't have good hygiene. They didn't understand that, the plague was spread from rats, and they didn't, clean things up. And so, the immune system had to be overpowered to get us to survive these pandemics, these epidemics that would really impact human life. So because of these advances in hygiene and medicines and vaccines and antibiotics, we've extended life expectancy by over 20 years, since 1920. And that's brought on a new host of diseases that have been caused by the immune system being overpowered. The autoimmune diseases. We've got so many of these autoimmune disease of every organ system, the thyroid, the liver, the brain, the heart. Every single organ has its own set of autoimmune diseases where the immune system is attacking us, not an infection. And we still are just starting to understand that and unlock the code of the immune system.
What is the reason for the autoimmune disorder?
We don't know.
Pandemic?
We don't know, but the belief is that the immune system was doing its job, trying to protect us from some infectious disease, producing an antibody that was supposed to attack that virus, that bacteria, but that antibody missed its target, and we say cross-reacted with a tissue in the body. And so we don't know, but we believe that all these autoimmune diseases might be from misdirected immune responses that are supposed to be targeting infections. But there's so many autoimmune diseases now. It's one of the main, you've heard of lupus and rheumatoid arthritis and Sjogren's syndrome. There's a whole host of these autoimmune diseases, all of them caused by overactive immune system. And now today, watch your television for, a day or half a day. You'll see a dozen ads for medications that are specifically designed to address and to fit in one little area of the immune system, like maybe block one molecule called a cytokine. So now you see ads like, Dupixent and Rinvoq and all these medicines on the TV that are used to treat autoimmune diseases.
With the cytokines, Mark, one of the phrases that I hadn't heard before COVID was the cytokine storm, where cytokines, which are the communication mechanism, right? You're saying to send the messages for what the white blood cells should do.
Sure.
The cytokine storm became dangerous in itself.
Yeah, because they're like gasoline that they pour on the fire of the immune system. It's like fanning the flames. And those cytokines, you're right, they are used for communication, but they also have an inflammatory effect. They sort of fan the flames of inflammation. So they're using these medicines now to target specific cytokines. Like I had a patient, and poor guy, he was in his 60s, and he developed terrible rheumatoid arthritis. And his joints were inflamed. He couldn't walk. He was using a walker. He was literally incapacitated by this autoimmune condition. And he was getting the standard treatment for it called Enbrel, which is a drug, but it wasn't working. And didn't know why, but he should have responded. So we decided to look at his cytokines. And turns out he had one cytokine called IL-6, interleukin-6, that was through the roof. And I told him, I said, look, there's a drug now out for this specific cytokine, interleukin-6. It's called Actemra. He goes on Actemra, and his disease immediately goes into remission like that. Like you could have predicted it, because it was like a lock and a key. That medicine was made to treat the cytokine that, was fueling his arthritis. And it put him in a remission, immediately.
Is there, some people watching this will want me to ask the question, is it plausible that some of the things that you put in the bucket of positive are having a side effect of creating these autoimmune diseases? So is it possible that there are some vaccines that haven't been looked at properly, or some interventions that are medical that are potentially causing
absolutely, because we
issues?
just don't know what causes it. There might be something that we really don't understand. Look at these microplastics that are now contaminating our entire world. And they're in our bodies. They're in our bloodstream. They're in our, everywhere. They found these in the brain. And so it's entirely plausible that something like that could be triggering this rash of autoimmune diseases.
So the modern way of living, whether it's industrial toxicity, whether it's a side effect of some medical interventions, we don't know. But all of these things need to be, on the table.
I don't know the answer, but I'm certainly open to the idea. But at the same time, it's interesting about these autoimmune conditions, mainly because they predominantly affect women. If you look at autoimmunity, it's much more common in women. And there's something very unique about women, as you know. And as women have babies, they can give birth. And what's incredible and miraculous about that is normally if there was another organism growing inside of you, your body would reject it. It's not you, it's completely foreign. It was something, the byproduct of you and your spouse.
Yeah. And so it's got only half of your DNA.
It's only half of your DNA, it's half of somebody else's. And that means the body should reject that fetus lickety-split.
But it doesn't.
But why doesn't it? There's something about a woman that can turn off the immune response around the uterus so that the baby doesn't get rejected. Yeah. We don't understand that at all.
Wow.
We have no clue.
Great.
We don't understand how that happens.
I can definitely see a whole episode on the 10 biggest things we don't understand. But,
here's another one, which is fascinating. When they do DNA samples of women, they're shocked that they see a Y chromosome. Well, how can a woman have a Y chromosome? She's got XX, no Y. Where'd the Y come from? And the answer is, she had a baby boy.
Oh, at some point, what?
She had a baby boy.
And that resulted in...
The DNA from the baby is still in the mother.
Wow.
It stays there forever.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that has an impact on generations.
Well, think about it. If a mom is retaining Y-containing chromosomes from giving birth to a boy, could that be triggering some autoimmunity? It's possible.
Right, so that's the plausible mechanism for why women appear to have.
We don't know. These are some curiosity we just don't understand. But there's something unique about women not rejecting a baby.
Yeah.
We don't get that. How does that happen? It's a miracle.
And that's one potential area to explore that might explain some mechanism.
It should be explored for sure.
Yeah.
But, it's really fascinating. So, we want the immune system to protect us from infections, but we don't want it to hurt us. And every time that immune system gets activated, you're getting older. You're aging. It's aging you. It's making your arthritis worse, your Alzheimer's worse. It's making your heart disease worse. It's making all these conditions that affect us, especially later in life, worse. It's why, believe it or not, some people are experimenting with taking immunosuppressants to live longer. It works great in animals, like in dogs. If you've got an old dog that's 10 years old and can't get up the stairs anymore, you give them this medicine and suddenly they're running around like they're 5 years old because it reduces all the inflammation in their joints and their shoulders and their hips, and they can move around now. So it's incredible that people are trying to take these immunosuppressives to live longer, and there's something to it.
Does it give them a greater potential for progressing cancer? I mean, what's the downside of an immunosuppressant?
Of course, you could be more susceptible to cancer or to infectious diseases, because if you're suppressing your immune system, you can't fight the infections. So isn't that the double-edged sword of the immune system?
Sounds like it.
We want to be on the right side of that hedge, But yeah, I mean, how do you, figure out that balance, The short answer is it's in our best interest to try to reduce inflammation.
Right. Yeah.
That was the whole substance of my book, Ultra Longevity, and that is we can slow the aging process and potentially eliminate these periods of accelerated aging by controlling inflammation.
We spoke about last time, but for this episode, can you just explain the spurts?
Yeah, because aging doesn't happen like the clock. You're a year older, but that doesn't mean your body got a year older. It might have gotten 5 years older in that year, depending on what happened. So you probably have had experience with this. Have you ever seen someone that was really sick and hospitalized, and maybe they had to be in the hospital for a month or more, and when they come out, it's like they're 5 years older? Or we see it with the presidents. Like, look at the presidents.
Obama went grey. Tony Blair is not a president. He went grey.
Look at how fast they age.
Absolutely.
When they're in stress, under those stressful conditions for years at a time.
Steve Jobs, rightly or wrongly, put his pancreatic cancer down to when he was trying to do Pixar and Apple at the same time, and he said he went rightly or wrongly. He has attributed the stress of that to his illness.
Yes. So my focus is on trying to, help people to lower the amount of inflammation in their body. And we measure it routinely.
Which are the best measures for that?
So there's a simple down and dirty blood test that's easy to get. It's not expensive. That's called the C-reactive protein.
CRP.
CRP. I mean, it's a silly name because doctors don't know how to name things, but and it doesn't stand for anything, to be honest. It's just the C-reactive protein. But
it doesn't know it's even called that, does it?
No, it doesn't. But all it is it's a protein that goes up when there's inflammation in your system. And the higher the inflammation, the higher that number.
So, I mean, let's make this specific. I had blood tests recently. I showed them to you. My CRP was, I think it was low. I mean, what's the range of CRP? What units is it measured in?
It's in milligrams per liter of blood. So this is a pretty, significant protein. Milligrams of it in a liter of blood. Yeah. That's a pretty high amount, So CRP can be very low, like 0, or it can be over 100. I've seen it, in the hundreds before.
And is it a crude measure or is it a good measure? CRP?
It's a very reliable and accurate measure. But when you find that there's inflammation, you don't always know why.
So before we move on to the why, let's take my example. I do have fatty liver. You've mentioned fatty liver as a cause of inflammatory response, a trigger for inflammatory response, but my CRP was low. Does that mean that it's not picking up something else? The CRP isn't as brilliant a measure as other potential measures. It's not the whole picture.
Your fatty liver might not be too bad. It's not enough to raise your CRP.
Right.
But if you had rheumatoid arthritis, let me tell you, it would be high.
So, I mean, I think I read that 30% of Americans have, and therefore probably British people as well, have some sort of non-alcoholic fatty liver issue.
It's very common because it's linked with obesity. And obesity is probably the number one most important cause of inflammation. And, it's not entirely clear why some people think that, just fat is an inflammatory organ, and that's why there's inflammation. But I don't think that's right. My opinion is that the inflammation is a result of eating.
Okay, so there's a co-cause really. It's sort of the eating produces what, oxidative stress, or what's the mechanism by which eating creates inflammation?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. First, let's back up. Why do we eat?
Yeah, you know what? There's some. Let's create a whole episode on why we eat, but let's especially why I eat. But let's answer the question in this episode as well.
I mean, why does the body need to eat?
So is this a quiz? I like
It's
the
a
quizzes.
quiz. It's a
quiz. So are we going to park the emotional dopamine here? Right. We're going to park all of
Forget
that
about
emotion.
that.
Forget emotional eating. So arguably, there's a requirement for certain nutrients which the body doesn't produce, number one. Number two, there's protein required for muscle. And number three, there's some kind of, arguably, some energy requirement. Discuss. Why does the body eat?
I mean, that's an excellent answer. So we need the nutrients to fuel our body's growth and development and repair, for sure. And then we need energy. Those are the main reasons. And the main reason we need to eat food is we need energy to do all the things that we do during the day. And the energy that our body uses is not food. We have to convert the food that we eat into a usable source of energy that our body can actually make use of and store. And that energy is the energy currency of life. It's called ATP.
Yeah.
Adenosine triphosphate. Everything that lives runs on ATP.
And just give me the stat. There's some amazing stat about how much ATP we produce.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't really believe it, but think about this. You can only last for 2 minutes on your current ATP stores. You've only got enough for 2 minutes. After that, you run out. And you need that ATP because you need it to breathe, for your heart to pump, you need it for your liver to work, your muscles to move. ATP does all of that. And I mean, plants use it, animals, we all run on ATP. And we keep on producing it every minute of every day. And when I ask people, like, how much ATP do you think you produce in a day?
It's an amazing stat. I mean, I can't remember the stat, but it blows my mind.
Well, I mean, I won't like, torture you on it.
No. Let's pretend I don't know. Is it 3 liters a day, Mark? Is it?
Well, I mean, people aren't going to believe this, but you produce twice your body's weight in ATP per day.
Incredible.
Twice your body's weight of ATP.
And that's because obviously it goes round and round.
It's recycled to ADP. So you
Yeah.
release a phosphate molecule, it's called dephosphorylation, and then you produce ADP, which then has to be recycled within 2 minutes to ATP again. And to produce ATP from food, we do need one other thing, which is
Oxygen.
Yeah, oxygen. Oxygen.
Okay.
Now, oxygen, I mean, people take it for granted,
Yeah.
tell you the truth. But the oxygen is required to turn food into ATP. And think about it. Our entire body is built for oxygen. It's all about oxygen. Okay, you got the lungs to breathe it in, sure. But then you got the blood to absorb it. The most cells in our body of a single type are the red blood cells. We have, in just a drop of blood, 1 drop of your blood, 250 million red blood cells in a drop of blood. And the only thing it does, carry oxygen and carbon dioxide. We've got 60,000 miles of blood vessels and capillaries in our body, 60,000 miles of capillaries. And that's to make sure every cell is within 2 cells of a capillary.
Wow.
Yeah, because it can't be farther away.
Wow.
It needs the oxygen.
Wow.
We've got the heart to pump it around. We've got this incredible system that's made to bring oxygen into our body. Everything is about oxygen. Now, we use oxygen to turn food into ATP to the tune of twice your body weight per day. If you don't have the oxygen, 2 minutes, story's over.
Amazing.
Yeah. Now, there's a price to pay.
So it's so breathing. That's why breathing is reasonably popular.
There's a price to pay for that process. There's a price to pay of producing ATP.
I think we're going to find out what it's called, aren't we?
Yeah, well, the price is the generation of the so-called reactive oxygen species, or otherwise known as a free radical.
Which is oxidative stress. And
we're not talking about hippies from the 60s. A free radical is an oxygen molecule that's become flammable.
Okay.
It's very flammable. And that oxygen molecule, reactive oxygen species, the free radical, that stuff's flammable. It's dangerous. It burns our cells from the inside out. And the more free radicals, the more dangerous. You know, Mother Nature's smart. She's not stupid. She knows how bad these free radicals are. And so there's a system that our body uses to get rid of these free radicals. And they're called antioxidants. But they're not the antioxidants you're thinking of, like vitamin C and vitamin E. These are antioxidants produced by our body, like superoxide dismutase, glutathione. These are some powerful antioxidants. And because Mother Nature knows that she's got to put those little sparks out or they're going to cause a fire. The problem comes is when the equation isn't balanced anymore. And that is too many calories, too much oxygen, too many free radicals. Body can't handle it. Now that is aging us. It's also the reason why if you feed an animal, even a human, less, they live longer, sometimes a lot longer, potentially like 30% longer. I mean, imagine if you could live 30% longer instead of getting to be 90, you could be 120 in good shape. That's what could happen if we could reduce our calorie intake.
Is it too late for someone of my age, 54?
Definitely.
To start it? No, but seriously, is it too late? Is it too late? We have an English phrase called wanker. Yeah? It's reserved. It's reserved. It's reserved for these special occasions. My English teacher, Mr. Fitz, told me that you should swear, but rarely. You wanker.
Sorry.
Good. So where were we? We were talking about oxidative. Basically, don't eat too much because you're going to have free radicals.
That's one easy answer.
Yeah, you're going to have free radicals.
And guess what? Yeah, people that eat less live longer. And people that eat less have fewer diseases, and they have less oxidative stress, and they have less inflammation. So that's why they live longer.
Okay, so I have to genuinely answer the question. Is the age of 54, obviously there's a lot of damage that's been done at this point. So should I just give up and eat McDonald's every day?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the story. But look, I mean, at 54, there's also some other, things that have happened. You've hurt yourself. You've injured yourself. You ruined this. You banged up that joint. You had some things that, get scars. And you had, and those don't always heal. Those things you carry with you. So it's not all about oxidative stress. But in terms of, let's say, living a long, healthy life, yeah, that's a good place to focus, for sure. It's also a place where we have control, to a degree. You can't control your genetics and, what happens on the cellular level, but you can control what you eat,
And so your book or your work on the immune system looked at the problem, and the problem can be summarized as what was there or is there to support us and help us has some toxic unintended consequences because these weapons of mass destruction are being used, but with really big side effects. I mean,
it's kind of a rule of nature, and that is you have to have the right amount of something, not too much, And look, the same is true with oxygen, We need oxygen, but it's at the same time dangerous to us. We require it. Can't go 2 minutes without it, but it's causing oxidative stress. And so there are these weird sort of things about living in this world The things that are good for us can also be bad for us
We may
in the
not
wrong
put
dose.
this in, but what does that mean for people doing hyperbaric oxygen right now? Could there be some downside or not really?
I mean, it's not about the hyperbaric oxygen side so much as it's about the calorie consumption side.
Okay.
So they don't have to worry that they're doing damage.
Right.
I'm not sure they're doing much good. It kind of depends on what they're trying to accomplish, but it's really on the calorie side of things.
So,
And by the way, that means that when it comes to eating, quantity is going to trump quality, meaning a little bit of bad food is better than a lot of good food.
okay, you said this to me before, and I think about it occasionally. Well, reasonable amount actually. But I probably think people say that the average male thinks about the Roman Empire 3 times a day or some weird stat. And one of the I don't know why that's true or if it's true, but one of the things that I think about is that statement. But then I look at the information that bad food is sending to the body, and I would like to make a case for the fact that whilst quantity is key, that type of food is also key.
Yeah, I mean, eating a little bit of high quality food is going to be better for you than eating a little bit of crappy food. But it's still better than eating a lot of good food.
Yeah.
I mean, you can overeat healthy food for yourself and, do...
Because of the calories and the oxidative stress side effect, the free radicals.
Exactly, because you've got to make ATP from that.
Yeah. Okay, so the optimized view. So you started to look at a whole bunch of potential solutions for this, and I know there are things like how to breathe and correctly. People say, well, I've been breathing for years, I've been fine. But there's a whole sort of like category of breathing, moving, except dancing, you call it. Before we come on to the solutions, is there anything else you wanted to do to summarize the problem? The actual problem of an overactive immune system before we look at the solutions?
We talked a little bit about measuring your inflammation level, this simple blood test, the C-reactive protein, which I've been tracking on patients for 25 years. And what I can tell you about that blood test is it predicts health and longevity. A lower CRP predicts a healthy person and someone that's going to keep on living a long time. A high CRP is a worry. Someone's going to have a shorter lifespan and is looking at, shortening their life. And so whatever, treatment you might try, you can tell if it's having the desired effect if you measure that CRP.
Are there secondary inflammatory tests? I heard of like a test called a gluconage or something, which...
There are other tests of inflammation. The simplest one is like the white blood count level in your blood. The more white blood cells in a drop of your blood, the shorter your lifespan.
Oh, that's interesting, because I think I came last time, I said, oh, look, Mark, my white blood cells seem a bit low. And I remember you saying that's not...
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the white blood cells, it's amazing because we have 1 trillion of them in our body. 1 trillion. In every drop of blood, there's about 500,000 white blood cells. Everyone is armed and dangerous.
I'm starting to think these cells are quite small, Mark.
Yeah, they're very small.
I'm starting to get the impression.
Very small. And they can do some big damage. So just the white blood count is a predictor of life expectancy.
Incredible. And I guess during the pandemic, the inflammatory response for something, let's say it was or wasn't from a laboratory, right? It was certainly a strange type of virus that we haven't experienced quite in our lifetimes. The inflammatory effects of a pandemic can actually potentially create accelerated aging or...
No question about it. I mean, look at how many people died. I mean, that's accelerated aging.
That's accelerated aging.
Puts you in the grave,
Quite accelerated,
but definitely the COVID was causing severe inflammation. And that's why these people are experiencing the so-called long COVID, because they still have inflammation that's, carry over from their infection. But there are ways to mitigate that and to reduce it. And, I think focusing on that is a very important, useful part of health, and that is to promote health going forward.
So what secondary markers, before we come on to solutions, if I, because a lot of this, I'm trying to use myself as a interesting guinea pig. Interesting guinea pig. And you could do the same on yours. What's your CRP? Do you measure it for yourself?
All the time. It's always less than 1.
Okay. And I wonder whether at some point I might try and find mine, actually. But in fact, do you have mine there?
I could dig it up.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. We can, we'll do an advert now.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
It says less than 5. So that means it wasn't a highly sensitive CRP, because they would have said 1.6 or 1.2. But let's see if there's a prior one that maybe I can find. There's another one that people measure, the so-called SED rate, which is another, inflammatory marker, sedimentation rate. They shortened it to SED rate. Yeah, here it was in 2021, 1.7, and it should be less than 1.
Okay.
So maybe it hasn't been perfect,
Okay.
I mean, that's not a dangerous level, but it's higher than you'd want it to be for healthy aging.
Good to know, isn't it?
Yeah.
Good to know.
So you might want to know, well, how could I lower it? How could I get it down?
I would like to know
how could I get it down further?
Yeah.
So one good way would be to cut the calorie intake. That would be like an easy thing to do that you could easily get a benefit from right away. Not only that, guess what? It also helps the fatty liver. So, cutting calorie intake is a good place to start. These medications that are called statins have gotten very popular because not their effect on cholesterol, which is why people tend to take them, but because they lower the CRP. And that's the reason why these drugs prevent heart attack and stroke. It's not because they're lowering cholesterol. It's because they're lowering inflammation in the body. And so that's one way to lower the CRP, is to be on a prescription medication that's proven to lower it.
Well, let's look at the, I guess, range of natural solutions as well that you put in the book.
Sure. I mean, being fitter is one way to lower the CRP. That means getting a little bit of exercise, which is a whole other conversation, and we should probably do a whole show on exercise, because people have gotten it wrong, to be honest.
Too much gym, or too much high intensity,
because
or too much oxygen stress, and
exercise wasn't even a fad until Jack LaLanne came along in his blue jumpsuit on TV. We used to watch him back in the 60s, and then he popularized exercise, He was the guy, and then it came Jane Fonda. So you got on your aerobics, costume, and you went to the gym and did some aerobics, and that was became a fad. Yeah. But before that, no, people didn't go to a gym.
Yeah.
I mean, my mom, she's 91. She's never been to a gym. Yeah. She stays active. She walks. She's healthy. But people have gotten the wrong idea about exercise, I think. And what they still don't understand is, let's say, the dose of exercise. Yep. They've looked at it in some pretty big studies, and we'll talk more about it. But the dose should be more moderate, let's say, rather than extreme. Unless, you're trying to run a marathon or compete or climb Mount Everest or whatever.
There was an interesting stat. I thought that people who run marathons actually have a higher incidence of infections.
Yeah, and they don't live longer. You would think, gosh, you can run a marathon, you could probably live forever. But no, they're not the longest lived people. Not at all. So some other ways to lower inflammation. Getting adequate sleep. Sleep deprivation results in some inflammation, and it's such a common thing. I feel bad because my patients call me and they say, Doc, can you prescribe a sleeping pill for me? And I'd be like, why? You can't sleep? Yeah, I can't. I keep waking up and I can't fall back asleep. Why don't you, meditate, or could you possibly relieve your stress in some other ways, rather than just taking it to bed with you, But it's such a problem because people are so worried these days, and they all want to take something to help them sleep.
Which should be a fundamentally human capability.
Fall asleep. It should be the easiest thing in the world. That doesn't take any special training.
I think we could take an episode on each of these things.
Oh, I think we could.
If you were to just run us through what is the list of things that you've actually written about in ultra longevity. We have the idea of, you talked about movement as dance, or exercise as dance.
Right. I mean, I like dancing because it brings joy into the equation, and the movement is aerobic, and it's the right amount of exercise. It's not too much. It's not too little. Most people wouldn't hurt themselves dancing. So it's a great type of exercise.
And you've put not just specifically dancing, but you've put it in a category of things that are rhythmically moving, like tennis or And I think in the book you talk about perhaps it reinforcing some of the natural rhythms that we have and working with the natural rhythms that we
You must have read the book because
it's an excellent book. I have certainly read the book, mate.
I love that idea about rhythms, because I mean, our whole biology has rhythm built into it. And if you think about it, I mean, think about a woman's monthly cycles. Think about your night and day, your circadian rhythm. Think about the rhythm.
Waves. If you look at energy waves and the moon cycle, it seems to genuinely have an impact on our health as well for reasons we don't completely understand, which we'd like to. But yeah, I mean, rhythms are very important. Circadian rhythms. There is an interesting story which we'll do another episode of you exploring whether actually the heart needs to pump rhythmically or not, or whether you can have a constant flow of blood. Let's not do that today.
There's the rhythm of the heart, for sure.
We'll come back to that.
Leapt up.
So dance, you've deliberately put in a category of movement which is joyous, sometimes group related. I think there's a Danish study that said that social sports like tennis or dance have a human to human dynamic which is better for you than just being alone in a gym in a dark without much oxygen in a gym in a basement.
It's also, when you think about it, it's sort of like a form of meditation. You know, because when you're playing tennis, for example, you're focused on one thing: get the ball. That's it. You're not thinking about the shopping list. It's just get the ball. Same thing is true with dance. When you're dancing, you're really just focusing on the music and your movement. So it becomes like a meditation.
And we know that in tribal ceremonies, dance has not just a communal impact, but it's often the way that warriors get rid of adrenaline or rebalance their hormone levels after hunting, literally jumping up and down. It's like the same reason that dogs do their thing. Yeah, absolutely. So I think
I love that. And
is it also fair to say that we know that trampolining has a particular impact on your body?
It might, but
you're skeptical on that one.
Well, only because I have a trampoline.
Oh, right.
And I tried to get on it, but I learned right away. That's for kids,
right? Okay.
That's not for us middle-agers.
Well, I have to say, there's a Bellicon, which is a smaller one, which you can spring for people like you and me, which I think is quite good. Yeah,
your back might be up for it, but mine's not for sure.
But anyway, dance as a joyous, some often communal or in a partnership.
Love it.
And tennis. What other things would you put into that category of dancing then?
Yeah, I mean, I think hiking fits in that category. Because it is sort of a joyous movement with rhythmic breathing, and it's got the right dosage of exercise. That's probably my favorite exercise, I think. But I mean, I love that idea, and that comes with a certain amount of breathing, and the breathing is important because it's a natural process that we also have control over, an automatic process that happens naturally, but that we can change on our willfully. And taking control of your breathing exerts some effects on the body. It's why a lot of the meditation practices incorporate some form of breathing exercises to help calm the mind and slow the body down and to try to reduce inflammation. And I think people, it's because it's an automatic part of living, they don't focus on it as much perhaps as they should. But there are ways to help calm yourself through breathing.
And I think that this is a great response to people that people say, I've got a breath. My friend Helen said the other day, I'm at some spa thing and I've got a session on breathing. I've been doing it all my life. What can they teach me? So I think it is important to explain that breathing can be a conscious activity. And when it becomes a conscious activity, it actually is a little bit like conscious eating. If we don't become conscious about our breathing, potentially we are allowing our breathing to be a response to, on an autonomic basis, to what's happening. But actually, a conscious breathing can bring us back to the present. Because I guess a lot of us live our lives in guilt in the past or worry about the future. So the ability of breathing to actually bring us back to the present and out of all of these imagined guilt experiences or future experiences. Even that's as one aspect of breathing plays a role.
Yeah, I mean, I probably told you this, but years ago, I had my own health problem, which was I had cancer.
Yeah.
And I had kidney cancer, and it was successfully operated on, removed. But when I was dealing with that, I really cherished the breathing because I didn't know how many more breaths I might get.
Oh, bless you.
And when you have that sort of feeling, you really do cherish every one,
wow.
you know. And I think breathing for me at that time took on a real special,
Wow, that's a
meaning and
powerful
a special feeling because, to think that you might not
I
have
think
that
it's
feeling,
something that is really important to not take for granted. I mean, if someone's ever been caught underwater, or sometimes you can do such intense exercise that you're gasping for breath and you don't take it for granted anymore at that point. And you've given a powerful story about, your kidney cancer that made you.
I mean, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but a lot of patients have had it, and I've had it too, where you have something called a panic attack. And with a panic attack, you're so anxious that you're not in control of your breathing. And so you start breathing too much, hyperventilating. And what's paradoxical is the more you hyperventilate, the more short of breath you feel. And I can remember telling myself, trying to talk myself down, telling myself, well, why are you breathing so fast? You're just sitting in a chair. You're not doing anything. You're not running a race. Why are you breathing like you're running a race? And I couldn't control it. I literally could not control it.
What is the solution for people? I think.
Well, the solution for me, was the old paper bag trick, believe it or not. And that is, I got out the brown paper bag, and I started breathing in the paper bag, and then you blow up the paper bag, and then you breathe that air back in. And suddenly that stopped it, because it helps you to balance the carbon dioxide levels, which have been dropped too low by hyperventilating. And so it's really told me how powerful the breath is and how the brain, plays a role in how we breathe.
Well, there is someone called Alan Donan that we're going to be interviewing. I'd love you to maybe even participate in that episode. He lives in Tenerife. He's a very, very experienced and proper expert in breathing. And there's also someone else who does holotropic breathing called Jorge Maestro, who is actually an incredible story that we'll talk about another time, where he had a skin issue, and none of the Western doctors, in Mexico, could deal with it, and it was breathing which solved it for him. So I know you're often a skeptic of these miracle cures, but I think to support your book, breathing
absolutely
can have an amazingly powerful impact on the immune system, because it was the immune system that was causing his skin issues, right? So the ability to calm the immune system through breathing, actually pretty powerful.
I love it.
But in that category of breathing, Mark, you've got not other things, a bit like within dance. Tennis is an example of dance within that category, is sort of meditation and relaxation. What else is in that category of breathing?
Yeah, I think the music gets into that, and the singing, is part of bringing in control of the breath. And it's also something that can be practiced. So when I give patients advice, my advice is usually to try to extend their breath out. When you breathe out, your pulse rate drops, your blood pressure drops, your nervous system calms down. And people are so focused sometimes on getting the breath in that they don't let the whole breath out. And if you're doing it properly, it should take about twice as long to breathe out as it does to breathe in. Now, the way our bodies are built, breathing in is an active process. The diaphragm contracts, it descends into the abdomen. That creates negative pressure in the chest, and we breathe the air in. That takes effort. Breathing out is relaxing. Doesn't take effort. It's just relaxation of those muscles.
If there's a lack of relaxation,
you can't breathe out
breathe out
properly.
properly,
Exactly. And then you start breathing in, and you'll get into this hyperventilating situation, which is hard to overcome unless you've got the brown paper bag. That really does, it becomes stressful. So that's one thing to try, and that is to breathe out longer.
Okay.
There's this trait of the cardiovascular system called heart rate variability. And that means that your pulse rate, your heart rate, is not always perfectly regular. I mean, when you put your watch on and you feel your pulse, they might give you a number like 70 or something like that. And you think that that's what your pulse rate is, 70 beats per minute. But it's not exactly 70. It's like 68, 70, 71, 65, 66, 67. It averages out to 70, but it varies a lot in between. And that's called heart rate variability. And it's an important marker of health. People that are in trouble and about to, keel over have low heart rate variability. A lot of these sensors that people wear now, these Oura rings and the smart watches, they'll track that and they'll give you a reading on your heart rate variability.
And you can optimize your HRV.
You can improve it. And what's interesting, what causes the heart rate variability is that your heart is connected to your lungs. And that is when we breathe in, that creates negative pressure in the chest. It pulls blood from our periphery into the center, into the heart. And that then slows down the heart. And when we breathe out, we have the opposite effect. So the heart is always tied to the breathing. Changes in the breathing produce this regular change in the heart rate that's healthy. If there's a disconnect between breathing and heart, suddenly you lose the heart rate variability, and now that person's in trouble.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is how the breathing affects the cardiovascular system.
And general advice for someone wanting to optimize their breathing. We'll do a whole episode on this. But
when I had the website for Ultra Longevity, we put a little breathing coach in there. And what it did is it had a series of tones that would tell you when to breathe in and when to breathe out. And very simply, and it brought you from like 10 breaths a minute down to 2 breaths per minute. If you're doing that properly and you're sitting in a chair and you're not exercising, you can easily be comfortable just 2 breaths per minute. Very comfortable. That means you're breathing in for 10 seconds, you're breathing out for 20 seconds, you're breathing in for 10 seconds, and you're breathing out for 20 seconds. That's 2 breaths in a minute. So it's very easy to do that if you're calm and relaxed and you coach your way down there. So we built that, breathing coach into the website, which was fun.
And that affects your nighttime respiratory cycle and your...
Not so much, because that's more automatic when at night. But this is when you're trying to control your breathing. And
but can by controlling your breathing then calm you down generally, that then might impact your nighttime?
It can. It can put you in a more restful state, let's say. But that's also something that people might need to practice, like during the day while they're awake. Yeah. And that is work on trying to breathe more slowly and let that breath continue as you're letting the air out. To do that takes a soft belly. You don't want to have a tight abs, when you're doing that, because if you're holding your belly and you can't breathe properly, you've got to let that pouch out, and then let the diaphragm descend into the belly and drink that air.
That's why a lot of yogis actually have quite big bellies.
It is. Because
they don't see that as a bad thing.
They don't.
It's
so true.
So we've got dance, we've got breathe. We've mentioned the food before, but the eating. How would you summarize that? Obviously, there are books and books and books and books you've written on this. But
we may want to spend more time on this, but there's some simple ideas behind eating that might be helpful. Remember, what we're trying to address is these free radicals that are being produced through eating food. And our body is trying to mop up these free radicals as best it can. And if we're not overeating, it can probably do a pretty darn good job. But if we want our diet to help us win that war of the free radicals, the key there is eating foods that also are rich in antioxidants, plant antioxidants, because those help us to deal with the free radicals that we're producing from eating calories. And those plant antioxidants are easy to find because those are the colors in the plants. So when you look at blueberries and strawberries, and you look at squash,
So
and
that's
you look
where
at
the eating the
pumpkins,
rainbow comes from. And
eating the rainbow.
We had a rainbow superfood salad at Leon that was popular, for example.
Exactly. Those colors are the antioxidants. Even colors like that you see in coffee. For example, those brown colors are antioxidants in coffee, and coffee is so helpful as a beverage.
Yeah.
So the colors. So I always try to get like
syrups.
a blend of colors.
Amazing. So, look, again, every time we mention something, there's going to be 5-10% of the people watching this going, plants are terrible, Mark. Didn't you understand the plant paradox? They're terrible. And I think you're pretty sure that the lectin argument against plants doesn't stand up.
Nobody's gotten into trouble eating plants.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's fair to say. Sorry, no, it's fair to say. It's fair to say. There are lots of people out there who are militant about meat only. And I think in the short term, you found some clients that have done well on meat only, but it's not something you'd recommend for the long run. Is that fair to say? That for a short period of time, the anti-inflammatory effects, the lower calorie effects can be beneficial for a meat only diet?
It could be a meat-only diet, but a meat-only diet is sort of, monochromatic. You get tired of it after a while. Everybody gets tired of it. So you want to bring in some variety because nobody wants to eat just one thing. I don't care what it is. Let's say it's ice cream. You can't eat just ice cream the rest of your life. You want some variety, and then that's very true of a meat-only diet.
We're going to come back to that as a whole thing. It's almost politicized. It's almost militant, the meat only.
So a great way to vary up the meat only diet is to throw the veggies in there. Why not? But obviously you don't want the hoagie, big sub sandwich because you're getting so many
but
empty
also
calories.
Variety, right? I mean, people that say, "Oh, broccoli is good for you," they're fine when they have a bowl of broccoli. That's not the answer.
It's
either,
too much.
It's too
much.
So,
it's too much. Too much of a good thing.
A lot of variety, good. So on the food, you'd say, in summary, you say get some good fats like olive oil or coconut oil, MCTs, whatever it might be. Don't eat too much. There's the whole Michael Pollan, eat food, mostly plants, not too much. But I think you would say the not too much is key.
That's the key for sure. And the not too much. I mean, if you really need a name of a diet, I'd say go Mediterranean because that's, probably the most studied diet. It's the most helpful that we know of. There are lots of variations of it and people can experiment around.
My friend Asim Malhotra has his poppy diet, which actually he thinks has had a significant effect on heart cardiovascular health. And we'll come back to that another time. But yes, it's a form of the Mediterranean diet, which is, good fats. And actually, in addition to not too much, some anti-inflammatory foods that aren't causing actual inflammation, and then some foods that combat the inflammation with those antioxidants. So that seems to be a fair way.
And I like this, this term ultra processed because those are the foods that are packaged and the foods you can buy in a store that we want to try to stay away from. You don't see those in the Mediterranean diet, so there's no ultra processed foods.
And coming back to the immune system, the plausible reason why the ultra processed foods are creating inflammation is that they are new. The body's not used to having them in that way because they are processed to the point where the body might start to create an inflammatory response to them.
I'm not sure that's the reason, and we might not know the whole reasons, but generally speaking, ultra-processed foods are designed to be digested and get into your bloodstream, into your brain really quick. So when you eat you feel good all of a sudden. Your brain is happy, and that is, it just was like giving, an IV bolus of glucose right to your brain. Suddenly you feel like good. I'm going to get some more of that stuff, because that made me feel good. But that's not healthy. That doesn't make your body feel good. That might have made your brain feel good for a little while. But it's probably just because these ultra-processed foods just get into your system like that. There's no digestion required.
Why is that bad?
All right, so when that Twinkie gets into your bloodstream, your pancreas sees that and it squirts out this much insulin. Now suddenly you got too much insulin in your system. And that makes you put on weight, for example. And so there's lots of downstream consequences.
What about ultra-processed foods that don't have an insulin response? Is it not plausible that there's an inflammatory thing going on, or some
like
sort of...
what, for example?
Well, so am I thinking that, for example, you could have an ultra-processed fat, which doesn't necessarily have a blood sugar increase, but it could have some other effect on the body that isn't related to insulin?
I mean, you'd have to be more specific, only because, like, for example, and I don't think it would necessarily be considered ultra-processed, but if you're taking a fish oil supplement, that's a processed product. That's something where they're purifying the fish's oil. It's not like eating the fish. And that might not be the same necessarily as eating the fish.
We had when I was at P&G in the mid-90s, we invented a fat that went straight through you. And it turned out there was something called, a problem with it was called anal leakage.
Like Orlistat.
Maybe. Maybe it might well have been, actually. But the problem was it was so novel for the body that not only did it create anal leakage, I think it's otherwise known as diarrhea, but the body responded to it negatively. And that would be an example of something that wouldn't increase your blood sugar necessarily, but it would actually have an effect on your body where your body is reacting in a way to something new, and therefore potentially creating an inflammatory response. I'm just putting it out there as a hypothesis that...
Excuse me, I don't know the answer, to tell you the truth. And I don't think there are long-term studies on people taking Orlistat to see if they live longer or not. So I can't really tell you, honestly. I think most forms of what would be considered ultra-processed foods are mainly around sugar, glucose, mainly around glucose. But, there may be, like, for example, there's a category of medicines that's become very popular now for diabetes that makes people pee out sugar, pee out the glucose. So let's say you could eat like a pie and your blood sugar goes up to 300 or whatever, but you just pee it out. And you'd think, gosh, that can't be good for you. That's got to be dangerous to be able to do that. But it's one solution.
The net effect.
You're not producing free radicals from glucose that you're peeing out. And these drugs have shown to help people with diabetes. So you would think that it would be a negative, but in some cases it may be a positive. And I think the same is probably true of Orlistat, and that is, in some cases, it might have helped some people.
So we'll come back to... the food one. That's not just one episode, that's a whole series of episodes. But what else is on the list then? We've got dance, we've got breathe, we've got eat. What else is in your list? Sleep?
Since I wrote the book so long ago and I can't remember what all the steps were, but I can, because it had a secret code.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, it had a secret
mnemonic?
code.
Yeah.
I didn't disclose what it was.
Right. Oh, what? This is the big reveal. It's a world exclusive.
You'll be the only one that knows.
Right, yeah.
So it was breathe.
Yes.
Love.
Yes.
Eat. Sleep.
Yes. It's so secret.
There's another
You've
S.
forgotten it. Oh, well, there's what in the list?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's
breathe, love, eat, sleep,
supplement.
Enhance and dance. Because
enhance is that.
It's spelled blessed. But anyways, the point is these are lifestyle changes that people could make to lower inflammation.
Okay, look, let's start again, right? So I'm going to ask you if you can remember all of the elements.
Portuguese.
But the funny thing is they're in Portuguese. So you can't use a mnemonic for this unless you had a Portuguese mnemonic. So I think we know the answer.
Soothe was the other S.
Soothe.
Yes.
And in Portuguese, and excuse my Portuguese language, respirar, comer,
come eat,
dormir. I think we know that
sleep,
one. Bailar,
dance,
amar, love, tranquilizar, sort of soothe, fortalecer, enhance. Okay, so we'll do a whole episode of this in Portuguese. This might actually help me with my Portuguese. This might help me with my Portuguese. We should go to Portugal. I've got a good place to go. So in English, it's basically breathe, eat, sleep. Bala is dance, love, soothe, and enhance.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, we've covered breathing, we've covered eating, sleeping. it's such an important thing that, a doctor friend of mine 5 years ago said, John, I'm really starting to understand the power of sleep. I mean, it's incredible that even 10 years ago we took it for granted. Was it like an overhang of the 80s, money never sleeps kind of attitude? What was it that made us not
I mean, it used to be a
appreciate?
badge of honor if you didn't sleep,
Yeah.
and that would be like your claim of fame if you only needed like 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night. But that's not many people.
No.
Most people
Margaret Thatcher,
need more.
Churchill, and my friend Steve Coltrane.
I'd say most people shoot for 7 hours. That's sort of like your target.
And when we say sleep, do you mean the period from first going to sleep to waking up, or do you mean the actual sleep during the night? Because some people,
actual amount of sleep through the night.
Do you mean,
that might take you 8 hours in bed to get 7 hours of sleep.
But you mean actual sleep. You don't mean from first going to sleep to waking up, including all the waking bits. You mean the actual asleep bits, yeah?
Yeah.
The sleepy bits.
Right. Now, it's funny because we do these little sleep tests here. And,
can you show us any of this? We can always add them graphically.
Let's see if I can.
I think I've got one of mine as well. Oh, there's a guy called John Vincent there. There we go.
And so you get data like this from someone sleeping. And you can tell so many interesting things about someone's sleep. So down here on the bottom graph is the sleep stages.
Yeah.
This bottom down here is the deep sleep. And this patient got very little deep sleep.
This patient being me.
Only about 10 minutes here, about 15 minutes here, and about 10 more minutes.
Right.
Very little, if any, deep sleep. This red, that's the dream stage, the REM sleep. So that's rapid eye movement sleep. You're supposed to get 4 dreams at 90 minutes. You only got 1.25.
Right.
Not enough dreams. And then this top line is how many times somebody woke up. Look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17.
I'm not sleeping well, am I?
18 times.
I'm not sleeping well.
On this particular night.
Yeah.
Now, here's the other interesting thing. This is the body position that somebody's in this black line. So you start off on your left side, then you went on your back, then you went on your left side, then you went on your right side, then you went on your back, then on your right side, then you went on your left side. I mean, you're like a mackerel. You're flipping around in that bed like you're on a rotisserie.
I need to sort this out, right?
Anyways, that's not a great night's sleep, and it's not a good sleep score. Now, what we can also sometimes tell from this is, what position someone should try to sleep in. Because we can tell from this what your best sleeping position is.
And mine is what?
Yours was by far on your left side.
Okay, so I need to sleep on my left side.
On your left side. It was your best night's sleep on your left side.
Okay.
But not on your back.
So
on your back was the worst.
So a bumper belt thing would be good?
Yeah, they do make those things. I mean, you can also, wear a fanny pack to bed, just like for training wheels, and then once you get the hang of it, you can get rid of it.
Right.
Or I've seen people do it with pillows where they just pack a lot of pillows in behind them so they can't, roll over. Or maybe you got one here that you're hugging on your side, so that keeps you on your side. But lots of things you could try.
Okay, interesting.
But no, that wasn't a great night's sleep.
That was, I have to say, I think I was on a bed. No disrespect to the person that has the inn here, but every time I turn, it was one of those beds that every time you turn, you bounce 5 times and it wakes you up. You know what I mean? It's like it wasn't good. And I think light is important. I mean, getting rid of, we have a house where sometimes we allow people to completely, because of the shutters, and people say get up at 10 o'clock and they haven't moved. I think the lack of light in your room is a big one, right?
It's a big one, for sure. I mean, the light is, what it's doing is it's going into our pineal gland. There's a direct connection between the retinas and the pineal gland, which is right here in the middle of the brain.
And it can even go through our eyelids, right? If we're in a light room.
It can even go through your eyelids.
Yeah.
And when light hits the pineal gland, it stops its production of the normal hormone melatonin.
Right.
And so the pineal gland makes melatonin, and it makes it on a light, dark basis. When it gets dark out, you make melatonin, it makes you go to sleep. As soon as the light hits your eyes, you stop making melatonin, and then you tend to wake up.
So there's an argument for, and I'll explain this, that in the morning, you should actually get sunlight because it sets up your circadian rhythms in a way that actually means that you're more likely to produce melatonin later in the day. How does that work? I mean, how does it work such that getting sunlight in the morning means that later, 12, 13, 14, 15 hours later, you're going to sleep better?
Well, I mean, one thing is that it's crazy how many people are trying to take melatonin. I mean, it's got to be one of the most popular, supplements that people take that has, strong hormonal effects in the body. I'm not sure this stuff should be over the counter, to be honest. And people are swallowing that stuff like it's candy, and they're overdosing.
Right.
When the brain makes melatonin, it makes microscopic little quantities, little tiny bits, and in a pulse-wise fashion. So you could never replicate that by taking a 5 milligram melatonin pill. And I think people are doing damage, to themselves by taking that stuff on a regular basis. That's not the way your brain's supposed to work.
So to try and get naturally into those circadian rhythms
exactly,
is
much better. Don't not to take something to try to force it.
And we know that as soon as we are on a screen at night, and we are maybe not just because of the blue light, but the stress of that, the activation, brain activation of that. I mean, I've been in situations where I've literally been completely ready to fall asleep, and my wife's come into the bedroom, or she started a conversation about, a stressful topic, and I don't sleep all night based on the activation of that conversation or having to have looked at the phone as a result of that conversation. So
if I've got a patient that's sick, I don't sleep. I'm thinking about them. I'm worried about them. I'm trying to find a solution. I can't sleep. I hear you. I get it. But you know what? If it's a couple nights like that, the next night I'm going to sleep.
Right, fair enough.
Because my body tells me, look,
it's
been 2 nights, you haven't slept. You gotta go down.
And your pillow is important. Someone said to me the other day that prior to age 30, prior to age 30, you don't give a shit about your pillow. After your 30th birthday, your pillow is the most important thing in your life, and you'd give up everything else.
I take it with me on vacation, because I love my pillow. I don't want to leave that home.
So some of the other aspects, then, let's talk about loving. Positive relationships seem to be a key, driver of longer health and immune system. But when you're loving, your immune system is calm, your autonomic nervous system is calm, your dopamine from a hug. Tell us about loving. Tell us about loving, Mark. You're the world's expert.
Yeah, there's so many things that love can do. It can heal, But I also think about it the opposite, and that is, what about people without love, It's so sad. People that are lonely and they don't have somebody in their lives that they don't feel the love, and that's hard. That's a big part of aging, unfortunately, because people get older and they don't have their friends around. They've lost family, they've lost friends, and then they feel lonely. And that's the tragic thing about aging, because you're supposed to be feeling great because you did a good job and you got to be 85 or 90, and suddenly you don't have the love, So my mom, she's 91, and she's lost all her close friends. She's outlived them. And, now she's got some friends that are younger. They're in their 70s, and that's great.
Yeah.
But the best thing is her great-grandkids live in the same town as her. So she does have family right there in her town. And, boy, you can see the love, and you can feel it. And you can see the smile on her face,
Absolutely.
and you can tell it makes her younger,
And same with my mum, right? My mum's been living with us for last couple of years. She has gone back to our house, but I think one of the things she dreads the most is the loneliness and the lack of contact. In a way, it's a double-edged sword of social media, right? Because on the one hand, it's a curse. On the other hand, it's allowing old people to be activated. My mum rang me the other day, we were in Copenhagen, and she said, the family WhatsApp groups come off my phone. And that was a panic to her, because to lose that contact
of course.
is terribly sad.
Yeah.
So loving in all of its forms, right? So it could be positive work relationships. I know when I have a toxic situation at work, fixing that has such a big positive ramification for sleep, for health, for everything. Even if one action that people took today, watching this, is give someone they love a hug for 20 seconds. And if they've got a toxic relationship that's brewing or persisting in a friendship or a work situation, then fix that, right? The amount of inflammation that's going to go away as a result of that. It's a practical thing that people can do.
I love it. I mean, people blame stress for a lot of their ailments, and it's a factor. I'm not sure it's the cause, but it's a magnifier, let's say. And that is, stress is like a big magnifying glass. So if something's wrong and you're under stress, it's going to be much
But isn't
better.
it having an effect on the immune system, stress?
It is, for sure.
Because we have a mental input. It has an inflammatory response. The body still feels under attack, even if it's not from a germ.
Yeah. So, for example, if you're in a car wreck or if you're, running from a bear, your CRP goes up.
Yeah,
In
the short term, and that's great and necessary and useful. And
yeah. So it does trigger an inflammatory response in the body. What chronic stress does, though, is different, and that might have other deleterious effects as opposed to like acute stress.
Well, I mean, let's talk about that because, and then before we come back to the other areas, which is, it does seem, there was a rat experiment that I think probably a doctor told me about it, didn't get the proper licensing for the rat experiment. It does sound pretty horrific, to be honest with you, but it was rats that had a relaxed life, rats that were stressed, and rats that were occasionally stressed. And the rats that were constantly stressed had a short life. The rats, we know they're not humans, right? But even good to understand for rats. But the rats that had relaxed life, they had average lifespans. The rats that had occasional stress with long periods of relaxation in between had the longest life. So there's something about that balance, that center line, that yin and yang in biology, where an occasional bit of stress actually reminds the body that it's alive or does something to activate something important, as long as it's interspersed with longer periods of relaxation. And that does seem to be replicated in the idea of hormesis or the idea of, cryotherapy being a short burst of stress on the body. But it's not something you wouldn't want to sit in an ice bath all day. But a minute per degree of centigrade does seem to have an effect positively.
Yeah, even in terms of strengthening yourself.
Yeah.
You've got to cause a little damage to cause the strength to happen.
Yeah.
So a little bit of stress is
what doesn't kill us makes us stronger.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
But actually that's not true, is it, the phrase, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger? Because actually we could be doing things that haven't killed us but have actually taken our immune system to a level which hasn't killed us but is aging us, to be fair. True. So actually that phrase doesn't always stack up. Yeah. So that's, thank you for that on sleep. We'll come back to that, a whole session on that, and loving. So there's a whole category you talked about with soothing, and I guess it's personal, so it's personal based on the individual, but it's things like aromatherapy or massage, some sort of activations and some therapies that support that.
Meditation would be, or sometimes have you heard of this? These flotation tanks.
Yes, yeah.
Do you have one?
No, but you recommended one before, and I keep meaning to do one.
They used to be called sensory deprivation tanks. And you went in these flotation tanks with body temperature water that had salt in it, so you float like a cork, and there's no light and there's no sound, and so you're just in there with yourself.
Which is faced with yourself.
Exactly. And for some people, that's a scary prospect. For other people, they cherish it. So,
well, one of the things that's popular in niche communities is the idea of being in a cave, where they put you in darkness, in a cave sometimes for 3 days. They put meals through a hatch, but it's the resetting of the autonomic nervous system and the thought process that you go through. And a friend of mine, Dermot, who's actually a very experienced mental health practitioner, says it was one of the most important things he's ever done, actually. I mean, it sounds horrific to me to be alone with myself. So what I do know is that soothing also includes things like el olfato and el sonido.
You know how soothing music is.
I mean, at a frequency level, I genuinely think that we're going to discover that music has a frequency impact on our bodies. I actually genuinely think that it does. I think it's something to explore.
I mean, I think there is too. And some frequencies harmonize and some frequencies are destructive.
Okay.
Depending on what they interact with. And I mean, I've asked this question to some experts that should have had the answer.
Right.
Because I wanted to know what the frequency of the universe was.
Right.
Because everything is, that's the background, frequency. And if we could harmonize with that, maybe it would enhance.
Well, I think that, in that category of soothing, things like, even singing bowls. And a friend of mine, Tony, she analyzes the blood through a microscope, whether you believe in that or not. Do you believe in that? There's she can look at the sort of the health of blood under a microscope.
Maybe some people with really a lot of experience might be able to do that.
So she's looked at blood before and after various different activities. One of the things that she says has a dramatic effect on the blood is sleep tape to optimize breathing. And another is singing bowls, the frequencies of the crystals, a lot of which come from Utah, actually, here, Salt Lake and the Utah area in America. But she says they have a dramatic effect on the before and after blood. She has these big crystals, some of which are more base, some of which are different frequencies. But I have to say, it does get you majorly into theta state. And you feel like I've slept. Well, I probably sleep better in one of her sessions than I did in that entire night on the sleep test. So yes, I think there's something to explore for us to explore together in other episodes around.
Yeah, I mean, there's this thing called binaural beats.
Yes, that definitely seems to have an impact on. Yeah. So I think sound is important. So there's a whole sort of soothing aspect, and then we've got sort of enhancing.
I think that was about things that you could take that could help. Yeah, supplement side of things that are.
And I mean,
herbal medicines.
Yes, and I think again we need to have a whole session on that. But what 2 or 3 things have stood the test of time for you now? If you were to say, for most people watching this or listening to this, what are the things you would actively recommend for people to consider?
I mean, the area of supplementation is a big category, and there might be a number of reasons why someone would take supplements, for example. Like they might have some nutrient deficiencies and they're trying to correct that. They, might take them for a specific reason. And supplements could be like a vitamin, it could be a mineral, it could be an herb,
a mushroom,
it could be a food product. And those have different effects, on the body.
So is there anything at all that the average person watching or listening to this should take? Or is it all
there's nothing specific that everybody should take. Right, so there's an easy answer to that. Okay. But there are a lot of things that somebody might want to take based on their issues. And I think of the herbal medicines as being weak medicines. And so things like turmeric and, resveratrol, these herbal medicines do have effects in the body. They're weak effects, but they do have effects. So I see those as weak medicines.
So let's talk about that, because one of the things I'd love to talk about is with your hopeful but skeptical view of herbal medicine. There are 2 ways, I guess, of taking herbal medicine, and this is something which we absolutely want to explore with the cooperation support of herbal medicine specialists as well. But it strikes me that there are brown bottle herbal interventions that are almost getting to the point of being like medicine, because they look at your system, they look at the very specific recipe, and they optimize it within that brown bottle, sometimes with high dosage. Then there's the just eat a lot of variety, like coming back to the rainbow eating argument, of just have a wide range of things which are at a lower dosage. Like metformin, for example, is from herbs. Aspirin is from meadowsweet and from the willow bark. But it does seem that there is a balance argument of a wide variety but small dosage of herbs does seem to do something to support the immune system in a way that is not too much to create too much of a side effect. Is that a general statement which stands up, which is if we are in nature and we're having a little bit of this and a little bit of that, we're scavenging here and there and not overdoing any one herb or one medicine, versus the brown bottle substitute for medicine herbalists? Is there an argument for just having a wide range of and a small amount of lots of different herbs?
I mean, a lot of these have made their way into foods, because, I mean, the spices are a good example. Like all the spices that people add to foods have therapeutic, effects in the body, or they have effects. And so those spices have been, incorporated in the diet, not just for flavor. They're there to produce a certain, effect.
Certainly in Indian traditions,
There's a
where
good
the
example.
Ayurvedic or the Vedic traditions
Sure.
encourage the use in food.
Yeah.
Or in certainly Chinese medicine.
Heavy use of spices.
Yes, exactly. And certain, a Chinese doctor wouldn't be averse to prescribing food.
Exactly. So a lot of those can be accomplished by changing the diet. Now, if somebody wants to take, turmeric in a pill, okay, rosemary, fine. You can make it in a pill, but it's also something that would be in food.
Yeah.
I think that's different than, trying to use herbs therapeutically, for a specific reason. Like, let's say somebody had rheumatoid arthritis and you wanted to treat that with herbal medicine. Well, then you might be on, green tea extract and, turmeric and resveratrol.
Yeah, on higher doses.
Yeah, the things that would, be therapeutic, on almost a medication strength basis, for that condition. But like a good example, another one is people want to lower their cholesterol. They take this red yeast rice,
which is just a statin. Yeah.
Well, it is. It's a natural statin. But the trouble is that red yeast rice has, 2 milligrams of it, and that one has 4 milligrams, and that one doesn't have any.
So your dosage is all over the
How do you know exactly how much of the statin is in there? Medications have been invented as small, highly bioactive compounds. And those are designed to have powerful effects in the body. So when you take a blood pressure medicine, it powerfully lowers the blood pressure. If you take, an Advil, it powerfully reduces inflammation more than turmeric, let's say. And so if you want a very highly active, bioactive compound, you look at a medication. Not only that, at least in this country, they've do some quality control on medicines. So generally the quality is good. Can't always say that about the supplements because they're not subject to the same, requirements.
I think that's certainly true. And I think that on the flip side, people who, when there's studies that say, this multivitamin has actually shortened life, not extended it, you have people saying, well, that's because they are not quality supplements. So the argument works both ways, that people who are pro supplements say that a lot of the studies on supplements are done with low quality supplements rather than high quality supplements. So, that's something else for us to explore separately. But there's nothing that...
People that believe in what they believe in always have an argument.
Exactly. Yes, it's like that's
never
Jesus.
Ends.
Jesus said that because of this. Yes, exactly. Totally, it gets us into circular or another layers of arguments. So, is there anything else that you would, for someone watching this, listening to this, for an overall set of actions that they can take from? Without looking at their situation, without going into hours and hours of studies of each of these areas, the summary would be, on food, don't eat too much, but try and eat foods that don't inflame and foods that help with the inflammation with lots of antioxidants. Get 7 hours sleep at night and optimize that for, don't activate yourself with, light or with, stress before you go to sleep, and try and get some sunshine in the morning. We've got the dancing, which is rhythmic movement of all types, including sex, I guess. We've got loving, which is having positive relationships, which we know from all sorts of blue zone studies has a positive effect. We've got the impact of soothing, and actually doing the things like, singing bowls or meditation or listening to music, which can support that. And then we've got the enhancing. There was also one other that, you talked about, which was strengthening. I think in Portuguese it was something.
Enhancement.
What was in that one? Fortaleza. Should we
That's
try?
enhancement, I think.
So no, that is enhancement. Okay, that is enhancement. But I guess, was there also something in don't in being free from toxins, or was that in another book?
No, but it's interesting because I mean that sounds like common sense. When you talk about getting sleep and eating healthy and moving your body and having people that you love around. I mean that all does make common sense, and I didn't want the book to be just a common sense book. Right. And so if you read the book, you'll find there's a lot more depth in terms of, what these actual steps do and what the science behind it is and what we can do within each of those categories, even beyond, I'm breathing. It's like, well, how should I breathe? And what do the studies show? So I would encourage people to take a look at the book because it is a deeper dive and it becomes more than just common sense.
More than just motherhood.
Yeah, it's not just what your grandmother told you to do.
Well, one of the things that we were thinking I like coming to see you, and one of the things that I was thinking of doing to have an excuse to come and see you again is see if we can create, and I know you love filming, right? But maybe create a course for people that is more of a deep dive on some of these areas, a course that people can follow and engage on the detail that goes beyond.
I'll read the book again and then I'll.
So I can recommend it. I can highly recommend it. Obviously, these are your daily practices. But Mark, is there anything else you wanted to say about this episode or this topic of the immune system?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I say, and we're just scratching the surface. To be honest, because learning how we can control the immune system is like the next step of human health. We'll have a way where we can activate the immune system to get rid of cancer in our body. I mean, the so-called immunotherapy. That's the next wave of cancer treatment. We all want to get immunotherapy.
Ironically, a friend of mine's had bladder cancer, Adam, and he said, John, I had this immunotherapy and I thought it would be advanced. He said, but it was just something like injecting TB into my bladder, something that they discovered in 1910. I mean, some of these immunotherapy solutions have also been around a while, right? In terms of, again, activating the immune system in the short term to deal with the cancer.
Sure, yeah.
But the whole range of new immunotherapy. I mean, another friend of mine, on the flip side, Hans, a brilliant man, he started Juno, which was the biggest sort of biotech listing, and it was immunotherapy for certain types of leukemia. He sold it for $12 billion. Well done him. Much more important, he would say, and I would, the impact this had on people's lives. So some of these immunotherapy solutions are very advanced and accelerating at such a rate.
Yes.
Yes.
So, for cancer care, for autoimmune disorders, which are very common, we're learning to unlock, the secrets of the immune system to direct it for good, so that we can live healthier lives. And it's just the beginning. It's just the beginning of what we're learning on that. So stay tuned and, buckle your seatbelt because the next 10 years are going to be very interesting.
Well, long live Mark Liponis.
And John Benson.
Thank you. I'll do my very best to get my CRP below 1 so that I can enjoy that seatbelt, buckle my seatbelt, enjoy that ride with you, mate. So thanks a lot.
We'll both be there together.
Thank you, mate. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Great sex. Thank you, mate.